They say revenge is a dish best served cold. But for the woman they left for dead, it was a 5-course meal served in the very boardroom they stole from her. She was the pregnant wife cast out with nothing but the clothes on her back, while her husband and his mistress flaunted their new life paid for with her tears. They thought she had vanished, a forgotten tragedy. They were wrong. 5 years later, a mysterious millionaire bought their failing company. And when she walked in to take her seat at the head of the table, their world didn't just crumble, it imploded. The rain in downtown Seattle had a certain rhythm, a relentless drumming that usually soothed Bianca. Tonight, it felt like a taunt. Each drop that slid down the floor-to-ceiling windows of her penthouse apartment seemed to mock the fragile perfection of her life. Inside, the air was warm, scented with the vanilla and sandalwood of an expensive candle. On the polished mahogany dining table, a single plate of untouched salmon and asparagus grew cold. It was their 5th wedding anniversary. Liam was late. Again. Bianca traced the rim of her water glass, her gaze drifting to a framed photo on the mantelpiece. It was from their wedding day. Liam, with his effortlessly charming smile and eyes the color of the Pacific on a clear day, was looking at her as if she were the only woman in the universe. She, in turn, was beaming her heart so full she thought it might burst. They were the golden couple, the envy of their circle. Liam, the brilliant co-founder of Innovatech Solutions, a rising star in the city's tech scene. And Bianca, his loving wife, the silent partner who had poured her entire inheritance into his dream, believing in him more than she believed in herself. Her phone buzzed, jolting her from her reverie. It was a text from Liam. "So sorry, Angel. Stuck in a crisis meeting. Can't be helped. We'll celebrate this weekend, I promise. Happy anniversary. I love you." A familiar pang of disappointment, sharp and unwelcome, pierced through her. It had become a pattern. The late nights, the cancelled dates, the vague excuses that always revolved around work. She tried to swallow her unease. He was building an empire for them, he always said, for their future. And there was a new secret reason to believe in that future. A reason she had been waiting for the perfect moment to reveal. Her hand drifted instinctively to her stomach. It was still flat, showing no sign of the tiny, precious life growing within her. 2 months, after years of trying, of quiet heartbreak and dashed hopes, she was finally pregnant. The thought was a secret sunbeam, a private joy she held close. Tonight was supposed to have been the night. She'd planned it all, a candle-lit dinner, his favorite wine, which she would pretend to sip, and then she would give him a small gift box containing a single, tiny baby shoe. Pushing her chair back, she decided to surprise him at the office. A wave of guilt washed over her. Liam hated being disturbed at work, but it was their anniversary. Surely even a crisis couldn't stand in the way of that. She'd just drop off the dinner she'd so lovingly prepared. A small romantic gesture. The Innovatech Solutions headquarters occupied the top 3 floors of a sleek glass and steel skyscraper. The security guard, a kindly man named George, greeted her with a warm smile. "Evening, Mrs. Hayes. Working late to keep the boss company." Something like that. "George?" She smiled back, her spirits lifting slightly. The elevator ride was silent, ascending through the building like a breath being held. The 48th floor, the executive suite, was eerily quiet. The bustling energy of the day had been replaced by a hushed stillness. Liam's office door was slightly ajar, a sliver of light spilling into the darkened hallway. Bianca's heart quickened with anticipation. She pushed the door open gently. "Liam, honey, I brought you." The words died in her throat. The scene before her was one of such profound betrayal that her mind struggled to process it. The crisis meeting was not in the boardroom. It was here. Liam was there, his back to the door, his expensive suit jacket carelessly thrown over a chair. And with him was Sarah Jenkins, his personal assistant. Sarah was a woman Bianca knew well, young, ambitious, with a razor-sharp intellect and a wardrobe to match. Bianca had always been kind to her, seeing a younger version of herself in Sarah's drive. But the woman in Liam's office now was a stranger. Her professional blouse was unbuttoned, her skirt hiked high on her thighs. She was perched on the edge of Liam's sprawling executive desk, her legs wrapped around his waist. His hands were tangled in her sleek blonde hair, their mouths locked in a kiss so passionate, so raw, it was a violation. Bianca made a small, strangled sound, a noise of pure animal pain. They sprang apart. Liam spun around his face, a mask of horror and disbelief. Sarah, however, looked almost triumphant. A slow, cruel smirk played on her lips as she leisurely straightened her clothes, her eyes cold and calculating, meeting Bianca's. "Bianca, what are you doing here?" Liam stammered, his voice hoarse. He took a step towards her, his hands outstretched as if to ward off the reality of the situation. But Bianca couldn't hear him. A roaring sound filled her ears, the sound of her world shattering into a million irreparable pieces. The carefully constructed facade of her life, the love, the trust, the shared dreams, it was all a lie, a sick, elaborate joke. 5 years, she whispered the words barely audible. "We've been married for 5 years. Bianca, listen to me. It's not what it looks like." He pleaded the classic, pathetic refrain of the guilty. It was Sarah who answered, her voice dripping with venomous sweetness. "Oh, I think it's exactly what it looks like," she said, sliding off the desk and walking towards Liam, possessively linking her arm through his. "Isn't it time you told her, Liam, about us?" Bianca's eyes flickered from her husband's ashen face to the smug woman beside him. "Us." Liam wouldn't meet her gaze. He stared at a point on the floor, his jaw tight. "Sarah and I, we're in love." The word struck Bianca with the force of a physical blow. Love. He used that word to describe this cheap, sordid affair, while texting the same hollow sentiment to his wife. "Liam has been wanting to tell you for months." Sarah continued, her tone conversational, as if they were discussing the weather. "He just didn't know how. He didn't want to hurt you." She paused, then added with a saccharine smile, "But I guess this works, too. Rips the bandage right off, doesn't it?" The room began to spin. Bianca clutched the doorframe for support, her body trembling. The baby. Her mind screamed the word. Her secret, her tiny beacon of hope, now felt like a lead weight in her womb. How could she bring a child into this wasteland of deceit? "I want you out of my house." Bianca finally managed, her voice shaking with a rage she didn't know she possessed. "Both of you, out!" Liam finally looked at her, but his eyes were cold, devoid of the love she once cherished. The shock had worn off, replaced by a chilling resolve. "Actually, Bianca," he said, his tone flat and businesslike, "it's not your house. What are you talking about? My name is on the deed." "Was," Sarah corrected her, her smile widening. "You signed some papers last month, remember? Liam said they were for refinancing, a formality." Bianca's blood ran cold. She remembered. Liam had rushed in one morning, a stack of documents in hand, saying their accountant needed her signature urgently. He'd pointed she'd signed. She had trusted him implicitly. "Those papers," Liam explained, his voice devoid of any emotion, "transferred all your assets into a new holding company. My holding company. The penthouse, the cars, even your shares in Innovatech. The shares you bought with your inheritance." The air left Bianca's lungs. He hadn't just cheated on her. He had systematically erased her. He had stripped her of everything: her home, her security, her future. He had planned this for months. Every loving word, every shared smile, every promise for the future had been a calculated lie. "You're penniless, Bianca," Sarah said, savoring each word. "And you're trespassing. I think it's time for you to go." Liam stood by, silent and complicit, as Sarah picked up the phone on his desk. "Security. Yes, we have an unauthorized individual on the 48th floor. A woman. She appears to be unstable. Please escort her from the building." Tears streamed down Bianca's face, hot and furious. She looked at Liam, searching for any flicker of the man she had loved, any hint of remorse. She found nothing, only the cold, hard eyes of a stranger. George, the kindly security guard, arrived a few minutes later, his face etched with confusion and pity. "Mrs. Hayes, is everything all right?" Bianca couldn't speak. She was numb, hollowed out. She allowed him to gently guide her towards the elevator, her body moving on autopilot. As the doors slid shut, she caught one last glimpse of her life, Liam and Sarah, standing together in the warm glow of the office, two predators celebrating their kill. She stumbled out of the skyscraper and into the relentless Seattle rain. She had no money, no phone, no keys. The clothes on her back were all she had left. The anniversary dinner she'd prepared was still in her car, a car that was no longer hers. She was alone, homeless, betrayed in the most brutal way imaginable. And she was pregnant with the child of the man who had just destroyed her. As the cold rain soaked her to the bone, a new terrifying reality set in. She had lost everything. The life she knew was over. And in the vast, indifferent city, not a single soul knew of the secret she carried, or the storm that had just consumed her world. The fight for survival had just begun. The first few weeks were a blur of primal survival. Bianca, the woman who once debated between charity galas, was now a ghost haunting the city's underbelly. She slept in bus shelters, the hard plastic benches a cruel mockery of her once plush king-sized bed. She ate from soup kitchens, the humility of it a constant burning shame. The faces around her were gaunt, etched with the harsh lines of poverty and despair, and she saw her own reflection in their hopeless eyes. Each day was a battle against hunger, cold, and the crushing weight of her new reality. The city she had once loved now felt like a labyrinth of painful memories. Every corner held a ghost of a life that was no longer hers. The cafe where Liam had proposed, the park where they used to walk their dog, the theater where they'd had their first date. She avoided these places like the plague, her grief too raw, too profound. But a more immediate, more terrifying grief was taking root. The stress, the malnutrition, the nights spent shivering in the damp Seattle air. It was all taking its toll. One grey morning, huddled in the relative privacy of a library bathroom, a sharp, cramping pain tore through her abdomen. It was followed by a wave of nausea, and then a horrifying rush of blood. There, in the sterile silence of a public restroom, she lost the baby. Her secret sunbeam, the last tiny piece of her old life, was extinguished. The physical pain was immense, but the emotional agony was a black hole that threatened to swallow her whole. She had lost her husband, her home, her fortune, and now her child. It was the ultimate, cruelest blow. For days, she was a hollow shell, a spectre of a woman wandering the streets with no purpose, no future. The thought of ending it all was a seductive whisper in the back of her mind. What was left to live for? It was in her darkest hour, sitting on a park bench as the sun set, that something shifted. She watched a young family playing nearby, their laughter echoing in the twilight. A father lifted his daughter onto his shoulders, the little girl squealing with delight. The sight didn't trigger the sharp pang of loss she expected. Instead, a different feeling began to smolder in the ashes of her despair rage. A cold, clear, all-consuming rage. They had taken everything from her. Liam and Sarah. They were living in her home, spending her money, thriving on the ruins of her life. They believed she was broken, destroyed, probably dead in a ditch somewhere. And in that moment, she made a vow. She would not be their victim. She would not be a tragic footnote in their story. She would survive. She would fight. And one day, she would have her revenge. That night, Bianca Hayes died. And from her ashes, a new woman began to rise. She started by selling the last remnant of her old life, her diamond wedding ring. She'd kept it hidden, a painful reminder of broken vows. She found a pawn shop in a seedy part of town and haggled for every last dollar, her voice steely, her eyes hard. It wasn't much, but it was enough for a room in a cheap boarding house and a few weeks of food. Her first job was washing dishes in a greasy diner, her hands raw and chapped from the hot water and harsh soap. The work was grueling, the pay abysmal. But it was honest. And it was hers. She worked double shifts, saving every penny, her anger fueling her like a furnace. She was no longer the soft, trusting woman who signed papers without reading them. She was sharp, focused, and relentless. With her small savings, she enrolled in night classes at a community college, studying business and finance. The subjects that had once bored her now fascinated her. She devoured textbooks, her mind a sponge, soaking up knowledge about corporate structures, hostile takeovers, and financial forensics. She was arming herself, forging the weapons she would one day use to reclaim what was hers. After earning her associate's degree with top honors, she got a low-level administrative job at a small, struggling tech firm. It was a world away from the glamour of Innovatech, but it was a start. Here she wasn't Mrs. Hayes, the socialite wife. She was just Bianca, the quiet, fiercely intelligent woman who worked harder than anyone else. Her ascent was meteoric. She didn't play office politics. She produced results. She saw inefficiencies no one else noticed, streamlined processes, and identified new market opportunities. Her bosses, impressed by her raw talent and ferocious work ethic, promoted her again and again. Within 2 years, she was a senior project manager. It was then that she was headhunted by Quantum Leap Dynamics, a major player in the tech industry and Innovatech's biggest rival. They offered her a position that came with a 6-figure salary and significant responsibility. It was her first taste of real power. At Quantum Leap, Bianca blossomed. She shed the last vestiges of her old self, cultivating a new persona. She was formidable, enigmatic, and utterly brilliant. She kept her personal life a fiercely guarded secret. No one knew where she came from, what drove her. They only knew her results. She spearheaded projects that brought the company hundreds of millions in revenue, earning a reputation as a strategic genius, a woman who could see 10 moves ahead, on the corporate chessboard. 5 years. 5 years to the day since she had stumbled out into the rain, broken and destitute. Bianca now stood in her own penthouse apartment, one even more luxurious than the one she had lost. The view of the Seattle skyline was breathtaking. She was no longer the wife of a tech mogul. She was the mogul. She was the executive vice president of strategy at Quantum Leap Dynamics, one of the most powerful women in the industry. Her phone rang. It was her CEO, a man named David Chen. "Bianca," he said, his voice buzzing with excitement. "The board has approved your proposal. It's a go. Project Nightingale is officially a go." A slow, cold smile touched Bianca's lips. "Excellent." She hung up and walked over to her desk, picking up a thick file. The cover read, "Project Nightingale Hostile Takeover Proposal. Target Company Innovatech Solutions." For the past year, Innovatech had been failing. Under Liam and Sarah's reckless and extravagant leadership, the company had squandered its initial success. They had made a series of disastrous business decisions driven by arrogance and greed. Their stock was plummeting, their investors were losing faith. They were vulnerable, ripe for the picking. Bianca had been watching, waiting patiently, gathering her forces. She had orchestrated this moment with the precision of a master tactician. She knew every weakness, every vulnerability, every skeleton in their closet. She had vanished from their lives 5 years ago, a ghost they had long since forgotten. But the ghost was about to return. And this time, she was the one in control. The ascent was complete. The collision was now inevitable. The news of the hostile takeover hit Innovatech Solutions like a tsunami. Panic rippled through the hallways. The company, once a beacon of innovation, was now a sinking ship, its captain and his first mate too busy plundering the cabins to notice the gaping hole in the hull. Liam Hayes, his charm worn thin by years of complacent leadership, scrambled to rally his board. But it was too late. Quantum Leap Dynamics' offer was too aggressive, their strategy too flawless. The shareholders, desperate to salvage their investments, jumped ship in droves. The takeover was swift and brutal. Within a week, it was a done deal. Innovatech Solutions, Liam's pride and joy, the company built on Bianca's stolen inheritance, now belonged to their biggest rival. An emergency all-hands board meeting was called, the purpose to meet the new leadership. The atmosphere in the 48th floor boardroom, the same room where Bianca's life had been shattered, was thick with tension and resentment. Liam sat at the head of the table, his face pale, his knuckles white as he gripped the armrests. Sarah sat beside him, her usual smugness replaced by a poorly concealed anxiety. Her expensive dress suddenly seemed too tight, her jewelry too gaudy. The other board members, a collection of grim-faced men and women, muttered amongst themselves their loyalty to Liam, evaporating with their stock options. "I don't understand how this happened," one of them grumbled. "Their strategy was airtight. It's like they knew every move we were going to make before we made it." "Who is behind this?" another asked. "Who is this mysterious EVP from Quantum Leap who orchestrated the whole damn thing?" Liam had no answers. He felt neutered, powerless. The company he had stolen was now being stolen from him, and he was utterly helpless to stop it. The boardroom doors swung open. David Chen, the CEO of Quantum Leap Dynamics, walked in, exuding an aura of calm authority. He was flanked by 2 associates. "Good morning, everyone," David said, his voice polite but firm. "I know this is a difficult transition, but I assure you we believe in the potential of this company. That's why we've put our best and brightest in charge of this merger." He stepped aside. Allow me to introduce you to the new CEO of Innovatech Solutions." Time seemed to slow down. Through the open doors, a figure emerged. A woman. She was tall, dressed in an impeccably tailored navy blue power suit that screamed quiet confidence. Her dark hair was styled in a chic, severe bob. Her face was elegant, her expression unreadable, her eyes shielded by an icy calm. It was Bianca. A collective gasp sucked the air out of the room. Board members who had known her as the quiet, unassuming Mrs. Hayes stared their mouths agape. But their shock was nothing compared to the cataclysmic explosion that went off in the minds of Liam and Sarah. Liam shot to his feet, a strangled noise escaping his lips. His face drained of all color, leaving it a pasty, sickly white. He looked as if he had seen a ghost, and in a way he had. Sarah's reaction was even more visceral. Her perfectly manicured hand flew to her mouth, her eyes widening in sheer, unadulterated terror. The blood-red lipstick she wore stood out in stark contrast to her suddenly pale face. This was impossible. A nightmare. Bianca was supposed to be gone. A forgotten tragedy. Not this. This titan of industry standing before them. Bianca's gaze swept across the room, cool and appraising. She didn't acknowledge the shockwaves her presence had caused. She walked to the head of the table, her heels clicking softly on the polished floor, the sound echoing the ticking of a bomb. She placed her leather portfolio down on the exact spot where Sarah had so brazenly sat 5 years ago. Her eyes, cold and sharp as shards of glass, finally landed on Liam. She held his gaze for a long, torturous moment, letting him drown in the abyss of his own shock and guilt. Then she shifted her attention to Sarah, a flicker of something unidentifiable. Contempt-pity in their depths. "Good morning," Bianca said, her voice a low, melodic purr that sent a shiver down Liam's spine. It was her voice, but it was different. Deeper. Harder. Stripped of the warmth and affection he remembered. "For those of you who don't know me, my name is Bianca, and as of this morning I am your new Chief Executive Officer." Silence. A thick, suffocating silence. "There will be many changes in the coming weeks," she continued, her tone crisp and businesslike. "We will be conducting a complete operational and financial audit. We will be restructuring. We will be rebuilding this company from the ground up, based on principles of integrity and innovation principles that have been sorely lacking." Each word was a perfectly aimed dart hitting Liam and Sarah with pinpoint accuracy. Liam finally found his voice, though it was a weak, trembling imitation of his usual confident baritone. "Bianca, I don't understand. How—" Bianca turned her full attention to him, a faint, humorless smile touching her lips. "How I worked. I learned. I persevered. While you were playing house with my money, I was building an empire. This empire." She gestured around the room, a room that was now unequivocally hers. Sarah, recovering from her initial shock, found a sliver of her old audacity. "You can't do this," she hissed, her voice trembling with rage. "This company is Liam's." Bianca's smile vanished. Her eyes narrowed into dangerous slits. "This company was built on a foundation of lies and theft," she said, her voice dropping to a deadly whisper. "It was built on my inheritance. It was built on my trust. You and Liam were merely its corrupt caretakers. Your tenure is over." She turned to the rest of the stunned board members. "Mr. Hayes will be staying on," she announced, the statement dropping like a guillotine. "As Junior Vice President of Legacy Integration, he will report directly to me." It was a masterstroke of cruelty. She wasn't just firing him. She was demoting him, humiliating him, forcing him to witness her triumph from a position of utter subservience. He was no longer the king of his castle. He was a court jester in hers. As for Miss Jenkins, Bianca continued, her gaze falling on Sarah with chilling indifference. Your position as personal assistant is of course redundant. My own assistant will be starting tomorrow. Human Resources will have your severance package ready this afternoon. You have 1 hour to clear out your desk. The finality in her voice was absolute. Sarah stared at her, her face a maelstrom of hatred and disbelief. She opened her mouth to protest, to scream, to unleash the torrent of venom building inside her, but no words came out. She had been dismissed, erased. Just as she and Liam had erased Bianca 5 years ago. Bianca clapped her hands together, a sharp, decisive sound that broke the spell. Well then, let's get to work, shall we? The collision had happened. The game had been reset. And Bianca, the woman they had left with nothing, now had everything. She was their boss, their judge, and their jury. The trial was about to begin. The first week under Bianca's reign was a masterclass in psychological warfare. She moved into the CEO's office, her office, and had it completely redecorated. The ostentatious mahogany desk Liam had favored was replaced with a sleek, minimalist structure of glass and chrome. The gaudy abstract paintings Sarah had chosen were taken down the walls, now bare, save for a single-framed stock certificate, Quantum Leap Dynamics. It was a constant, silent reminder of who was in charge. Liam was a man adrift in a sea of his own making. He was relegated to a small, sterile office on a lower floor, a space that felt more like a prison cell than a workspace. The title Junior Vice President of Legacy Integration was a meaningless, humiliating invention. His tasks consisted of compiling old data reports and documenting past project leads, forcing him to relive the history of the company he had both built and destroyed. He was a ghost in his own machine, forced to watch as Bianca with surgical precision dismantled his legacy and built her own. His feelings were a toxic, confusing cocktail. There was the deep, gnawing regret, the ghost of the gentle, loving wife he had so cruelly discarded. He saw her in flashes the way Bianca's brow would furrow in concentration, a mannerism he dimly remembered. But that woman was gone. In her place was this formidable, untouchable powerhouse, and to his shame, he felt a new, twisted flicker of desire. The power, the confidence, the sheer, unadulterated strength she radiated was intoxicating. He had crushed the delicate flower, only to find it had regrown as a Venus flytrap, beautiful and deadly. Sarah, on the other hand, was consumed by a singular burning emotion, hatred. Being fired was a humiliation. Being dismissed so contemptuously by Bianca was an existential threat. Her life with Liam was built on the spoils of their victory over Bianca. Now the vanquished had returned as the conqueror, and Sarah's entire world was built on shifting sand. She didn't clear out her desk and leave quietly. She festered. Her severance package was generous, a final ironic twist of Bianca's knife, and she used that money not to move on, but to plot. She spent her days in expensive coffee shops, her phone glued to her ear, calling old contacts from Innovatech, fishing for gossip, for any scrap of information she could use against Bianca. "She's a monster," Sarah would hiss into the phone to a former colleague. "Cold, calculating. You have to be careful. There's something not right about her. Where did she even come from 5 years? and she just appears out of nowhere with all this power. It's suspicious." Her whispers began to spread like a virus through the company's servers. Rumors circulated in hushed tones by the water cooler and in private chat messages. She must have a rich benefactor. Maybe she blackmailed her way to the top. No one gets that successful that fast on their own. Sarah was planting seeds of doubt, trying to poison the well of Bianca's authority. She was convinced there had to be a secret, a weakness, a dirty little scandal she could expose to bring the whole edifice crashing down. Bianca was not oblivious to the whispers. She had anticipated them, but she didn't react. She remained focused, impassive, her gaze fixed on her objective, the complete overhaul of Innovatech. She worked tirelessly, her days a blur of meetings, financial analyses, and strategic planning sessions. In this hostile new environment, however, she found an unexpected ally. His name was Marcus Thorne. He was in his late 50s, the chief financial officer, and one of the few board members who had been with Innovatech from its inception. He was a man of quiet integrity, who had been increasingly disgusted by Liam and Sarah's reckless management. He had watched them drive the company he loved into the ground, and had felt powerless to stop it. Marcus saw through Sarah's smear campaign immediately. More importantly, he saw the brilliance in Bianca. He was mesmerized by her sharp intellect, her deep understanding of the market, and her unwavering vision. One evening, he found her working late, the city lights twinkling behind her in the vast expanse of her office window. "You should go home, you know," he said gently, standing in the doorway. "The company won't collapse if you take a few hours off." Bianca looked up from a spreadsheet, a faint, tired smile touching her lips. "There's a lot to be done, Marcus. You're doing a remarkable job," he said, walking into the room. "What you've accomplished in a matter of weeks is extraordinary." He paused, then decided to take a risk. "I was there, you know, at the beginning. I knew you and Liam when you first started this. I remember your passion, your belief." Bianca's mask of composure slipped for just a fraction of a second. A flicker of old pain crossed her features before she quickly suppressed it. "That was a long time ago," she said quietly. "I also know what they did to you was wrong." Marcus continued, his voice low and sincere. "I never approved of Sarah, or the way Liam changed. The rumors they're spreading now, it's despicable." Bianca looked at him, truly looked at him, and saw a genuine kindness in his eyes, a loyalty not to the old regime or the new, but to the company itself, to what was right. "Thank you, Marcus," she said, the words carrying a weight that went far beyond simple politeness. "It means a lot to hear you say that." "I want you to know you have my full support," he said. "Whatever you need. This company deserves a second chance, and you are the one to give it that." It was a small moment, but a significant one. Bianca had spent 5 years building walls around herself, trusting no one. Marcus's simple act of decency was the first crack in that fortress. She now had an ally, someone on the inside who saw her not just as a ruthless corporate raider, but as a true leader. Meanwhile, Sarah's desperation grew. Her whispers weren't having the desired effect. Bianca's position seemed unassailable. So she escalated her scheme. She hired a private investigator, a shady character named Rick, to dig into Bianca's past. "I want everything," Sarah told him, her voice hard as nails, as they met in a dimly lit bar. For 5 years, this woman was off the grid. Find out where she was, who she was with, what she was doing. There has to be something, A messy divorce, a lawsuit, a criminal record. Something I can use to destroy her. Rick, a man who reveled in the dirt of other people's lives, smiled. Don't you worry, Miss Jenkins. Everyone has secrets. It's just a matter of finding them. The scheme was in motion. As Bianca worked to rebuild a company, Sarah worked to tear down its leader. And Liam, trapped between the woman he had wronged and the woman who had helped him do it, was a ticking time bomb. His guilt and resentment, a volatile combination waiting for a spark. The whispers were about to become a storm. The internal audit initiated by Bianca and spearheaded by Marcus Thorne began to yield its toxic fruit. It started as a trickle, then became a flood. The deeper Marcus and his team of forensic accountants dug into Innovatech's finances from the past 5 years, the more a disturbing picture of gross negligence and systematic fraud emerged. It was all there, hidden in plain sight, within padded expense reports, dummy corporations, and inflated invoices. Lavish business trips for Liam and Sarah to Bali and the French Riviera. Company funds used for down payments on luxury cars and designer wardrobes. Consulting fees paid to a shell company whose sole director was Sarah's cousin. It was a cesspool of greed and corruption, a testament to their arrogance. They had treated the company's coffers as their personal piggy bank, so certain they would never be held accountable. Marcus would bring the findings to Bianca's office each evening, his face a mixture of grim satisfaction and professional outrage. "It's worse than we thought," he said one night, laying out a file thick with incriminating documents on her glass desk. "They didn't just mismanage the company. They actively embezzled from it. We're talking millions, Bianca. Millions of dollars." Bianca examined the evidence, her expression a mask of cold fury. Each document was a fresh stab of betrayal, a new confirmation of the depth of their depravity. This wasn't just about a broken heart anymore. This was a criminal conspiracy. They hadn't just thrown her out. They had robbed her, the shareholders and the employees, blind. As the evidence mounted, the pressure on Liam began to crack his carefully constructed composure. He saw Marcus's team hauling boxes of financial records from the archives. He saw stern-faced accountants interviewing his former subordinates. The walls were closing in, and the stench of his own guilt was becoming unbearable. He was a passenger on a train he couldn't stop heading straight for a cliff. His relationship with Sarah, already strained by Bianca's return, fractured completely. Their panicked phone calls devolved into bitter, accusatory shouting matches. "This is your fault," Liam would yell into his phone, hiding in a stairwell. "You're spending your ridiculous demands. You were too greedy." "My fault," Sarah would shriek back. "You were the one signing the checks, you coward. You were so desperate to keep me happy, you would have signed anything." They were like two rats trapped in a cage, turning on each other as the water level rose. The love they had once professed was exposed for what it was, a transactional alliance of convenience and mutual greed. While the financial noose tightened, Sarah's private investigator was hitting a wall. Rick the PI was good at his job, but Bianca had covered her tracks with meticulous care. For 5 years, she had lived a quiet, almost monastic life. She had no debts, no lawsuits, no social media presence. Her life was a closed book. "I'm telling you, Miss Jenkins, there's nothing here," Rick reported back to a frantic Sarah. "The woman lived like a nun, worked, studied, slept, that's it. She paid her rent on time, her taxes were immaculate. There's no dirt to dig." "That's impossible," Sarah screeched, pacing her living room, a room paid for with stolen money. "Look harder. Check hospital records, police reports. Something must have happened." Her desperation led Rick to a new, darker path. Hospital records. He used a series of illegal pretexts and bribes to access sealed medical files from Seattle General Hospital, and there he found it. A record from 5 years ago. An emergency admission for a Jane Doe found collapsed. The diagnosis: severe emotional distress, malnutrition, and a spontaneous abortion. A miscarriage. Rick felt a slimy thrill of victory. This was it. The dirt Sarah wanted. He called her immediately. "I've got something," he said, his voice greasy with triumph. "Something big." He told her everything. A slow, venomous smile spread across Sarah's face. This was better than a lawsuit, better than a criminal record. This was personal. This was pain. This was a weapon she could use to shatter Bianca's icy composure and expose her to the world not as a powerful CEO, but as a damaged, tragic victim. That evening, Bianca was working late with Marcus, finalizing the audit report. The sheer scale of the fraud was staggering. As they sat in the quiet of her office, Marcus could see the toll the past few weeks had taken on her. The armor of the powerful CEO was still in place, but he could see the fatigue in her eyes, the ghost of an old sadness that never quite left her. "Are you all right?" he asked gently. Bianca looked out at the city lights, her reflection a faint silhouette against the glass. "They didn't just steal money, Marcus," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "They stole years of my life. They took a woman who believed in love and trust, and they broke her." She paused, taking a shaky breath. She had never spoken of this to anyone. But in the quiet trust she had built with Marcus, the words came tumbling out. "I was pregnant when they threw me out, Marcus. I was carrying Liam's child." Marcus stared at her, his heart clenching with a profound sorrow and a fresh wave of fury towards Liam and Sarah. "Bianca, I had no idea. I lost the baby." She continued, her voice thick with unshed tears. "The stress, everything. I lost him. I was alone." In that moment, she wasn't the formidable CEO of Quantum Leap Dynamics. She was just Bianca, a woman sharing a story of unimaginable pain. It was a moment of pure, raw vulnerability, a glimpse into the furnace that had forged her strength. "They tried to erase me," she said, her voice regaining its steel. "They thought I would just disappear. But you can't erase something that's been burned into you. You can only use the fire to reforge yourself." As she spoke those words, an email landed in her inbox. The subject line was a single word: "Remember." It was from an anonymous address. Attached was a single file, a scanned document, a hospital record from 5 years ago. Her hospital record, under the name Jane Doe. Below the image was a single line of text: "The world would be very interested to hear the tragic story of the barren CEO. Resign now, or everyone will know your secret." The unraveling was complete. Sarah had found her weapon. The financial audit was about to expose their crimes, but Sarah had just launched her own preemptive strike, aimed directly at Bianca's heart. The final confrontation was no longer just about business. It had become a war with no rules. The blackmail email was a declaration of war. For a moment, seeing the stark black and white of the hospital record on her screen, Bianca felt the icy grip of that old trauma. The shame, the pain, the loneliness of that sterile bathroom floor. It all came rushing back. Sarah's attack was as cruel as it was calculated, designed to cripple her with the weight of her own tragedy. Sarah believed this secret was Bianca's greatest weakness. She was about to find out it had become her greatest strength. Instead of shattering, Bianca felt a surge of cold, righteous fury. They had taken her child from her. Now they were trying to use that loss to silence her. They had crossed the final line. There would be no more quiet maneuvers, no more strategic chess moves. It was time to burn their world to the ground. She looked at Marcus, her eyes blazing with a fire he had never seen before. "She's made her move," Bianca said, her voice deceptively calm. "Now I'll make mine." She turned to her computer and began typing. "Call an emergency meeting of the board of directors, full attendance mandatory, and make sure Liam Hayes is there. Tell him his future depends on it." The next morning, the 48th floor boardroom was once again filled with an anxious energy. The board members, already reeling from the rumors of the audit, now sensed a final dramatic reckoning was at hand. Liam stood at the back of the room, looking haggard and drawn. He had no idea what this meeting was about, but he felt a sense of impending doom, a feeling that his life was about to be irrevocably altered. The doors opened, and Bianca strode in. She was not wearing her usual power suit. Today she was dressed in a simple, elegant black dress. There was no pretense, no armor, just a woman ready to face her demons. She didn't take her seat at the head of the table. Instead, she stood before them, a lone figure against the backdrop of the Seattle skyline. "Thank you all for coming on such short notice." She began, her voice clear and steady, resonating with an unnerving calm. "For the past several weeks, Mr. Thorne and his team have been conducting a thorough financial audit of this company's activities over the last 5 years. I have the results here." She gestured to a thick binder on the table, which Marcus solemnly opened. "The audit has uncovered a pattern of systematic fraud, embezzlement, and criminal conspiracy," Bianca announced, her eyes scanning the faces of the board members. "Funds in excess of $7 million have been illegally diverted from this company for personal use." A wave of shocked murmurs swept through the room. These funds were used to finance a lifestyle of obscene luxury by the 2 individuals this board entrusted with the company's leadership, Liam Hayes and Sarah Jenkins. Liam flinched as if he'd been struck. All eyes in the room turned to him, a sea of accusatory glares. "The evidence is irrefutable," Bianca continued, her voice like a judge's gavel. "We have bank statements, falsified invoices, testimony from coerced employees, and a clear money trail leading from Innovatech's accounts directly to shell corporations controlled by Ms. Jenkins and Mr. Hayes." She paused, letting the weight of her words sink in. "The district attorney's office has been notified. A criminal investigation is already underway." This was it. The public disgrace, the legal ruin. Liam felt the floor give way beneath him. He was finished. But Bianca wasn't done. The financial execution was complete. Now came the personal one. "This is a story of corporate greed," she said, her voice softening slightly, drawing them in. "But it is also a personal story. It's my story. And I believe you all deserve to know the whole truth." She looked directly at Liam, her gaze pinning him in place. "5 years ago, I was not just Liam's wife. I was his partner. The seed money for this company, the money that gave him his start, came from my inheritance. I gave him everything I had, because I believed in him." She began to pace slowly, her voice filled with a raw, captivating emotion. "On the night of our 5th wedding anniversary, I came to this very office to surprise him, and I found him with his assistant, Sarah Jenkins, here on that desk." The board members stared, utterly engrossed. This was no longer a business meeting. It was a confession, a tragedy unfolding before their eyes. "He told me he was in love with her," Bianca said, her voice cracking, for the first time a sliver of the old pain showing through. And then he informed me that he had tricked me into signing away my home, my assets and my shares in this company. He and Ms. Jenkins threw me out of this building with nothing but the clothes on my back. Liam squeezed his eyes shut, unable to bear the weight of her testimony, the truth of his own monstrous actions laid bare. They left me homeless, penniless. Bianca's voice grew stronger, fueled by the memory. But they took more than my money. Last night I received a blackmail threat, an attempt to force my resignation. They threatened to expose a secret I have held for 5 years, a secret they clearly see as a source of shame. She stopped pacing and stood perfectly still, her presence commanding the entire room. When Liam Hayes threw me onto the street, she said, her voice ringing with defiance, I was 2 months pregnant with his child. A collective horrified gasp filled the silence. Liam's head snapped up his eyes wide with a dawning, sickening understanding. Pregnant. She had been pregnant. The thought, the reality of it, was a physical blow, knocking the last of the air from his lungs. I lost the baby, Bianca stated, her voice devoid of self-pity, filled only with a terrible, steely strength. I lost our child because of the stress and the trauma and the poverty they forced upon me. I lost him alone on the floor of a public bathroom. Tears were now openly streaming down the faces of several board members. The air was thick with a mixture of pity for Bianca and utter revulsion for Liam. This is the dirt they tried to use against me, Bianca said, her eyes locking with Liam's. The loss of my son. They believe it is my weakness, my shame. They are wrong. It is the bedrock on which I have rebuilt my life. It is the fire that fuels me. It is the memory of what I survived that makes me completely, utterly unbreakable. She picked up the audit binder. You did not just betray a wife, Liam. You destroyed a family. You didn't just steal from a company. You stole a future from your own child. She walked over to him, her steps measured and deliberate. He shrank back in his chair, a pathetic, broken man. She dropped the heavy binder on the table in front of him. The sound here echoed like a jail door slamming shut. Your corporate crimes will be handled by the courts, she said, her voice dropping to a low, intense whisper for his ears only. But this is between you and whatever is left of your soul. You have to live with this. Every day for the rest of your life, you will remember the son you never knew. That will be your prison. Without another word, she turned her back on him and faced the stunned, silent board. The confrontation was over. She had not only exposed his crimes, she had stripped him of his humanity, leaving him with nothing but the ashes of his guilt. She had taken their ugliest weapon and turned it into her coronation. The aftermath was swift. With the confrontation having been so absolute, there was no defense for Liam and Sarah. They were promptly arrested, and their sensational trial for fraud and embezzlement became a public spectacle. Convicted and disgraced, their downfall was absolute. Liam, haunted by the spectre of his unborn son, was left a hollow man already serving a life sentence in a prison of his own making. In the ensuing turmoil at Innovatech Solutions, Bianca was a pillar of strength. Shunning celebration, she focused only on the work to be done. She called an all-hands meeting, facing a workforce fearful and uncertain about the future of the scandal-scarred company. Standing before them not as a conqueror, but as a leader, she addressed the betrayal head-on. That era of greed and lies is over, she declared, her voice calm but firm. She outlined a new vision built on a foundation of integrity, transparency, and relentless innovation. She announced profit-sharing initiatives and better benefits, committing to a culture that valued its employees above all. "I know what it feels like to have your trust broken," she said, her sincerity palpable. "This company's greatest asset is not its market share. It is you." As she spoke, the fear in the room melted away, replaced by a growing sense of hope. When she finished, a single person, Marcus Thorne, began to clap. He was joined by another, and then the entire auditorium erupted in a thunderous, heartfelt ovation, a vote of confidence for their new leader. Bianca stood on the stage, a faint, genuine smile on her face, and for the first time in 5 years, she felt a sense of peace. The ghosts of the past were finally quiet. She had not just reclaimed what was stolen, she had transformed it. Her revenge was not the destruction of her enemies, but the creation of her own new and brilliant legacy. So ends the incredible saga of Bianca Hayes, a story that proves the deepest betrayals can forge the strongest souls. She was pushed from the highest tower of love and trust, left with nothing but the ashes of a life and the secret sorrow of a lost child. But from those ashes, she didn't just rise. She rebuilt an empire and served justice not with hatred, but with undeniable success. Her story is a powerful reminder that our past does not have to be our prison. Your greatest pain can be repurposed into your greatest power, and the ultimate revenge is not sinking to their level, but building a life so magnificent they can only watch in awe. If Bianca's journey from heartbreak to head of the boardroom moved you, please show your support by hitting that like button, sharing this story with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribing for more tales of incredible resilience and ultimate triumph.